I want to just answer a question that came up on the stage yesterday. Maybe it's on your list, I don't know. This idea, well, if we're saying that God created everything, who created God? Who created God? How many of you have heard that kind of claim or wondered that yourself? That's why I knew I wanted to answer it. So a couple things about that strike me as interesting. The first is, as Christians, we believe in the law of causality. As scientists, they believe in the law of causality, which says that anything that has a beginning has a cause. Anything that changes, like its position in the room, has a cause which is causing the change. Follow me? The law of causation requires a couple of things that if they exist, you know you have a cause. But we don't believe that God began to exist. He's always existed. So he doesn't need a cause based on the causal law. We don't believe that God changes. And this is why we don't believe he needs a cause. In other words, our definition of God as Christians is that God is the uncreated creator. So if you're going to ask, well, then who created the uncreated creator? Well, duh, that's in the definition, right? Who created the uncreated? He's uncreated. That's the part of his definition. But if it makes you feel any better, everyone believes in an uncreated creator. These people who posit the multiverse do not believe the multiverse came into existence. They believe that that multiverse generator is eternal. It's uncreated. So when someone asks me, well, who created your God? Well, who created your multiverse generator? Where's this conversation going? We both believe that there is some cause of the universe that is itself uncreated. We both agree on that, right? Well, yeah. The only difference is I believe that that creator, that uncaused first cause, is personal. And you believe the uncaused first cause is impersonal, set of physics in a quantum environment called a multiverse generator. So we both believe. We're both looking for the same thing, guys. That question, who created your God? Well, okay, who created whatever you think caused the universe? We all have to answer that question. Now, it turns out that if there is, what would make God God is his eternal nature. That's one of the things that makes him God. Make sense? So I don't think that question really, to me, it's a conversation stopper. We need to move past it to talk about, well, yeah, we all agree there's something out there that's uncreated. Now the question is, what is it? That's all that's left to talk about. If God, you're telling me as a Christian that God created everything, okay, fine, then who created God? Now that might seem like a really simple objection that maybe it's like, does anybody really offer that kind of, yeah, people offer that kind of objection all the time. I happen to know because I'm on social media a lot and I see what people say in response to posts that I post or posts that somebody else posts. And not only that, I get a lot of parents who will write to me and say this is one of the first questions that their children ask them growing up. And they're not quite sure sometimes what to say in response. Now, without having a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old in mind, I want to be able to give you a couple of ways, 3 ways really, to answer this question. To answer in a way that actually draws out and continues the conversation. Because that's a lot what we're trying to do here. We're not trying to stop a conversation. We're not trying to debate people. We're trying to initiate a conversation that takes several more steps. So I'll go ahead and put my first response for you up on the screen and let's talk about how you might approach it. So here it is. Okay, that question, who created God? If you think about it, in many ways, that's kind of nonsensical, right? Let me show you why. The classic definition of God, the one that we offer as Christians, the one that theists offer, people who believe in God, they basically will say it like this. God is the uncreated creator. You hear what I just said? God is the uncreated creator. That's the definition of God. So when someone asks who created God, they're really asking who created the uncreated creator. Can you see the problem there? See, here's the problem. The definition, God is by definition uncreated. So the question you're asking in some ways is kind of illogical, right? I mean, it's like asking what sound is silence? Well, silence is the lack of sound. That's what the definition is. So that question is also a little bit nonsensical, right? I mean, a lot nonsensical. Once you know the definition of a term, some questions become unreasonable. Now, can you see now how that question, who created God, is unreasonable once you know the definition of God? Now, this response really tries to tap in just on a first level response to the simple definition that we offer as theists. Right? Now, I think still as an atheist, I would have pushed back on that kind of response, right? Okay, fine, so you created a definition that gets you out of the problem. That doesn't help me. That doesn't really even help you, I would have said as an atheist. So, but I'd still want us, because every time you offer levels of response on any objection, I think you have to keep in mind who you're talking to. And that person you're talking to may be satisfied that, okay, I get it, this makes sense. When you compare it to another unreasonable question like the sound of silence, okay, I can understand that. And this may be all you need to move the conversation forward. Now, I'm going to give you a couple more responses, though, that will start to unwrap the onion, unpeel the onion down through the layers to help you know all of these. And so even though I've separated out these three responses as I have, it does not mean that you're necessarily going to take them in this order, or that you're necessarily going to give only one part of the response and not maybe join two of them together. You may decide to do that, but I want you to see that this first approach to responding to the objection is really just about defining terms. And this is what happens when we spend time with jurors in criminal trials. We help them understand the definitions of legal terms so that later on they won't be confused by either side who might try to change a definition. That's a very common strategy in defense trials. Defense teams will try to change, well, what do you mean? He didn't mean it that way. What did he mean by using that expression with the victim? What does he mean by using? They want to change definitions in order to get themselves out of problems. Well, sometimes we can do that. We can be guilty of that too. But a lot of us who are as non-believers will also change definitions. We talked about this before, for example, with the idea of what is nothing. If the universe came into existence from nothing, well, what do we mean by nothing? So you'll see that some people will try to change the definition of nothing to get out of the conundrum. So here, what we're trying to do is hold people to clear definitions. You'll notice that when we're speaking about philosophical issues, or even about legal issues, definitions are critical. We have to be on the same page. So this is a good place to start because it helps you to lay the foundation for the definition. Okay, in response to this question, you might say, well, look, okay, I get it. You're asking the question, who created it? Well, look, every worldview makes claims, right, about the nature of the world around us, the universe, for example. Some atheists, and I was an atheist for many years until I was 35 years old, they actually believe that the universe itself is eternal. And if that's the case, it requires no cause. Some atheists believe the universe emerged from a quantum vacuum of some sort. We just talked about that a minute ago with the idea that the universe emerged from nothing. Or that it's maybe one of many universes in a collection of multiverses. They believe this quantum environment, by the way, is eternal. You know that, right? Therefore, it requires no cause. So here's my whole point. Everyone believes in something eternal. Even as a non-Christian, I believe that either the universe was eternal or that whatever caused the universe, and I would have said it wasn't God, is eternal. Christians aren't any different than that, right? I mean, look, all of us believe in some sort of uncaused first cause. But we as Christians just believe that cause is personal rather than impersonal. That's really the only thing that separates the two of us, is if you're an atheist, you believe in an impersonal uncaused first cause, and I believe in a personal uncaused cause. Have you ever thought about how difficult it is to explain, though, the personal attributes of our existence? You know, like the information, which we know only comes from intelligence. We find this in DNA. We have consciousness on a personal level, personal consciousness, and we even have these objective moral obligations, which are always between persons. And we sense them all throughout the history of our species. And if there's if there's a universe filled with other alien life forms like Star Trek, we would feel these moral obligations toward the Klingons and Romulans too. My point is, we all believe there are these overarching, transcendent moral obligations, and moral obligations are always between persons. You can't get those from physics. If there isn't a personal uncaused first cause, how do we explain that stuff? So we all agree there's something that is eternal, rather. We just don't agree if it's personal. Now, do you see what I'm trying to do here is to make clear that this is really not an objection that anyone can level against us if they're not also willing to answer it for themselves. because this is the state of all of our decision making on this. We all are looking for that uncaused first cause. Why? Because if the cause of the universe is also caused, you're going to ask the question, who caused it? What caused it? And what caused the cause of it? And what caused the cause of it? We're going to go on forever doing that. And that problem of infinite regress, the only way you get around that is you propose there's something that is not itself caused. And that is the beginning. And we all believe in this. And I did this myself as somebody who's an atheist who believed in Big Bang cosmology. I believed that whatever that cause was of the first cause of the universe, that cause did not need an explanation. Well, how is that really any different than looking at God? I actually think that the evidence in the universe, if you're fair and if you look at it fairly, you'll realize that a personal, incredibly powerful, non-spatial, non-temporal, non-material cause is a better explanation for those attributes of the universe you would only get if there was a personal cause. So we have to be honest about that. That's really where the question isn't about whether we've got an uncaused first cause. The question is it personal or impersonal? And if that's the case, now you can begin to make a case for why you think it would have to be personal. And this is where we came back to what we started off talking about at the beginning of the show. Are you prepared to make that case? Because you might open up an entire Pandora's box of explanations by just suggesting that, hey, we both agree on this. All we don't disagree on is whether or not the cause is personal. Well, now someone's going to ask you, well, so why should I believe it's personal? And now you have to be ready. Now, in the book God's Crime Scene, which I wrote in an effort to try to answer this question, I think there are 8 pieces of evidence in the universe that have to be explained. And I do think the best explanation for those 8 pieces is a cause outside of the universe that is personal. But that required me to spend some time mastering the evidence for consciousness, for free agency, for moral obligations, for information in DNA. These are things that, the appearance of design in biology, the appearance of design in the cosmos, these are things that I think scream personal cause. Creative, thoughtful, intentional, purposeful, personal causes. But you're going to have to master that evidence for yourself if you hope to be persuasive with the people in your world. So that's the challenge, right? But at least I've given you a couple of ways of beginning to address the issue. 1, let's look at the definition. 2, let's make it clear that all of us are in the same position looking for an explanation for the uncaused cause of the universe. We'll take a break. We'll come back. I'll give you one that's, I think, a little bit of fun, and it's philosophical. Here is the answer I often give to people. Okay, I want you to imagine a scenario with me. Just imagine a scenario. Okay, we're serving a search warrant. You're part of a SWAT team. I've been on SWAT teams for years, so I know what that looks like. I've been at that door, getting ready to kick the door, getting ready to serve a search warrant or to get into a barricaded suspect, anything like that. So I've been there before. But imagine this time that location is barricaded, right? And the first officer is standing at the door. It could be anybody. It could be you. You turn to the next and say, oh, you know what? I forgot to bring my battering ram. I can't get this door open without a ram. Can I borrow yours? And the next SWAT officer with all of his gear, he's got all of his equipment with him. He says, well, yeah, sure, you can borrow mine, but I forgot to bring mine too, so I'll have to borrow it from the next guy to loan it to you. So this officer, the second officer in the line, he now turns to the third and asks to borrow his battering ram, but guess what? The third guy in the line doesn't have a battering ram either, and he says, I've got to borrow one in order to let you have it. So he turns to the fourth, and this goes on and on. No one owning a battering ram. He turns to the next and repeats it over and over and over again. And look, unfortunately, he doesn't have it. He is what JP would call a borrowing lender. In order to lend the battering ram to you, he's going to have to borrow it from somebody else, and on and on and on it goes down the chain. Unless one of these officers is what JP would call an owning lender. In other words, he's got a ram that you can borrow. Well, then no one's going to have a ram to knock that door down. And if the thing being borrowed isn't a battering ram at all, but it's instead existence, okay, well, then if there isn't an owning lender of existence, that means a lender that is eternal, is self-existent, that has existence as part of its nature. It's eternal. It's a necessary being. If there's not something like that in the line, then you're not going to have existence any more than you would have a battering ram. None of us would exist as borrowing lenders, and that's all we are. we exist and then we have kids and we pass on our existence to those. But unless there's an eternal owning lender of existence, we couldn't be here to begin with. So look, yeah, do we think that there's a cause that is uncaused? Absolutely. Can you see how that kind of eternal being is both logical and necessary? Now, that's a little bit more of a mouthful, right, in order to explain to somebody. And I get that. But the story is sometimes helpful, I think, because this idea that we must have an owning lender in the chain of SWAT officers in order for a RAM to be produced and given to one of the borrowing lenders who then lends it up the line to the persons at the front door, you don't get a RAM. You don't get existence either unless there is an owning lender. So whatever it is that's out there, there has to be a first cause that is itself an owning lender of existence. So again, we're back to, we all agree, there has to be, philosophically, we know there has to be this one necessary cause that is itself uncaused. The only question left is that cause personal? Now we went kind of a long way around to get back to where we started. And I think that this, by the time we get done, is a helpful way to explain to people. And again, you may use one of those three, whichever seems most appropriate to you. You might decide that you are going to use all three kind of morph together in one way. You may just have those in the back of your mind on the shelf that you can draw from as you're speaking to your friends or family members. I think what's really helpful is, for me at least, when I first began to think about these issues as a very new Christian, I had an hour and a half drive to work in Los Angeles County. And I would spend that drive having these conversations in my head, these make-believe conversations in my head. How would I say this? So whenever I was asked this question in real life, it was never the first time I had answered it, because I had answered it in my conversations in my head for weeks, months, and years prior to this. So now is the time to use that time. Do you run? Do you exercise? Good time to think about such things. Do you have a drive of your own? Good time to start thinking about these things. When you have a moment while you're waiting in line, good time to start thinking about these. Redeem the time and start to practice these conversations in your mind. I've given you 3 tools to put in your tool belt to answer this kind of objection so that it won't become a conversation stopper. It'll just kind of become a way a catalyst for you to continue the conversation. Hope that's been helpful for you. And now we're going to take a break. We'll come back next week and offer another objection and ways in which to answer that objection to keep the conversation going. Until then, I'll see you right back here at Cold Case Christianity.